Hello everybody, welcome to Animations with Rive and Flutter, the series. The video series that will transform you from a Flutter developer into a master animator in no time. I am Roman, Flutter GDE, Rive Ambassador, and I'll be your guide through this exciting journey. Are you tired of static, lifeless UIs? Are you ready to bring your Flutter applications to life with animations that pop, sizzle, and delight? Then you've come to the right place. So, what is Rive? Rive is a game changer for creating stunning animations for your Flutter applications. In this series, we will focus on integrating Rive with Flutter, but Rive can also support other platforms. Rive is a powerful tool that allows you to create interactive, high-performance animations that can respond to users' input, adapt to different screen sizes, and will make your apps stand from the crowd. Rive is revolutionizing the way that we create animations. It's collaborative, interactive, and incredibly performant. In this series, we will uncover what makes Rive so special and why it is the perfect choice for your next Flutter project. Think of it as a more modern and versatile alternative to traditional animation tools like Adobe Animation or Adobe After Effects, even to some legacy tools like Flash. But why use Rive? It is interactive. Rive lets you create animations that react to users' input, such as mouse clicks, touch gestures, etc. This opens up a whole world of possibilities for creating engaging user experiences. It is lightweight and performant. Rive animations are exported as lightweight files that can be easily integrated into websites, apps, and games. This ensures smooth performance even on low-power devices. Real-time collaboration. Rive allows designers and developers to work together in real time, making the animation workflow more efficient and collaborative. Cross-platform. Rive animations can be exported to various platforms, including web, iOS, Android, Flutter, and game engines such as Unity and Unreal. What can you create in Rive? The possibilities are endless, but here are a few examples. You can create interactive website elements, buttons, icons, loaders, and other components that respond to user interactions. Animated characters and creatures. You can bring your characters to life with expressive animations and interactive features. Game characters and environments, augmented reality experiences, and even data visualizations. Some of the key features of Rive include state machines. Create complex animations with multiple states and transitions. Constraints. Control the movement and behavior of elements such as inverse kinematics and path constraints. Animation mixing. Blend between different animations or create smooth and natural transitions. Customizable effects. You can add effects such as shadows, glows, or blurs to your animation. Code-free interactivity. You can create interactive animations without a single line of code. As mentioned, in this series, we will explore the amazing world of Rive. We will learn how to use the Rive Editor to design stunning animations, integrate them seamlessly into your Flutter projects, and even control them with code for truly dynamic experiences. By the way, this video is not sponsored by Rive. This comes from my personal experience as I've come to learn Rive and incorporate it into my own projects. And I'd like to empower all of you to also level up your applications and bring that extra level of quality and make them stand out from the rest. So if you end up liking this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can get notified of other Rive and Flutter content coming my way. Thank you so much for your support. So buckle up, grab your keyboard, and get ready to unleash the power of Rive. In this video, we will dive into the fundamentals of Rive, go through the Rive Editor, explore its key features, and discover why it's the ultimate animation tool for Flutter developers. So let's get started. Hello everybody, welcome to Roman Just Codes. I am Roman, I am a Flutter GDE, but I am also a Rive Ambassador. And in this video series, we're going to be touching on Rive with Flutter. So what is Rive? Rive is a game changer for creating stunning animations for your Flutter applications. In this series, we will focus on integrating Rive with Flutter, but Rive can also work with other platforms. But this is mainly geared towards Flutter developers who want to bring another level of quality. They want to step up their Flutter applications and bring them the level of quality that only Rive can give to them. So Rive is a powerful tool that lets you create interactive, high-performance animations that can respond to user input, adapt to different screens, and will make your apps stand out from the competition. Rive is revolutionizing how we create animations. What I love about Rive is that it's very collaborative, very interactive, and incredibly performant. In this specific video, we're going to uncover what makes Rive so special and why it's the perfect choice for your next Flutter project. This is the first of many videos, so stay tuned for the rest of the videos in the series. Some of you Flutter developers might be thinking, but Flutter already provides a bunch of animation widgets. That is all great. Of course, you should continue using those widgets, but Flutter presents some limitations whenever you want to create really complex highly interactive animations, vector-based animations that require a lot of complex interactions, a lot of user input, and respond to gestures, respond to multiple screen sizes, and for example, even like animating a character and creating complex scenes. So Flutter is great. So the existing library of widgets available in Flutter are great for certain use cases, and then you can use those in combination with Rive animations to definitely bring your applications to the next level. So why would you use Rive instead of, again, the existing widgets available in Flutter? Rive is very interactive. It lets you create animations that react to user input, like I mentioned. It's very lightweight and performant. Like you will see whenever we export one of the files, when we create the animations in Rive, when we export the files, your mind will be blown. You will see how very lightweight, how performant it is. Again, those files can be easily integrated in your websites, on your mobile apps, on your games. Also, the real-time collaboration aspect of it, because it allows designers and developers to do some sort of handshake and also work together in real time, which is great. It makes the animation workflow more efficient and collaborative. So we will see all of those things. And last but not least is cross-platform. Like it's not only available for one single platform, but you could do web, iOS, Android, of course, Flutter. That is the reason why we're touching that. And game engines like Unity and Unreal. In this particular series, we will see how we're going to be creating like buttons, icons, characters. We're going to be touching on some of those concepts that people see like, oh, it's really complex. I would love to have the knowledge so I can create the same things that some of the other folks out there have created. So we will talk about some of those concepts that you may have heard about Rive, like state machines, constraints, animation mixing, customizable effects, a bunch of stuff. So stay tuned. Let's take it one step at a time. We're going to start with some of the fundamentals. Right now, what we're going to start is like introducing you to the editor. That way you get familiar with it and you can start from the ground up. You can start building a nice foundation, and then we can take you to those other more advanced topics. That way you can build your way up to that. So why don't we do that right now? So the first thing that I wanted to show you is the editor, but even before that, let's just check the pricing. Some people may be asking, okay, so what if I want to start using Rive? How do I get it? The first thing is there are 3 tiers in which you can start using Rive. There's the free, Voyager, and Enterprise. Of course, if you're testing the waters and you just want to take it for a spin, you can actually use the free tier, and it gives you unlimited personal files. It gives you 3 collaborative files. And of course, you can use all of the runtimes, which is pretty good. So this is a great way for you to start into the world of Rive, testing the waters and just like dipping your toes into it. Of course, there's the Voyager and the Enterprise. I would definitely encourage, if you could, invest in the Voyager, which gives you custom fonts, which is amazing. You can upload like your own fonts and audio if you want to support audio. Also allow you to have shared links and also batch export files for runtime, which is amazing. And see, you could just get it either yearly or monthly. And of course, if you can convince your manager or whoever in your company who can actually get like an enterprise level license, it would be amazing. I'm telling you, I love Rive so much that, again, I immediately started adopting it. I pitched it to my manager. We're using it at my job. So it's a great tool for you to start, again, bringing a next level of quality to your Flutter applications. It is a very well-sound investment if you really, really are serious about bringing your Flutter applications to the next level. The main editor is web-based, but here they show you that you can download desktop versions of the Rive Editor. So you have a Mac version and you have the Windows version. So just try to download the one that you feel most comfortable with. For me, I like to use the web editor because I am so addicted to Rive. Everywhere I go, anywhere I am, and there's a web browser, I start doing and prototyping like a Rive animation or some idea that just pops into my head. So that is the reason why I like the web editor and I gravitate to that the most. But there's a Mac version and a Windows desktop version, and you can go ahead and download those for free. Also, what I love about Rive is that it gives you the ability to post or publish your creations and share it with the world using community files. So these are some of the files that I've created. These are some of the Rive animations that I've created in the past. If you just click on one of these, you would be able to create one of these if you just put your mind to it. Of course, you could say, oh, Roman, but I cannot draw like that. Well, that's a separate course, of course. But if you at least pick up the basics and you learn the basics of the tooling and you know how to create those animations using basic shapes, then you're good to go. And that's exactly what we're going to be dealing here. Using just basic shapes, you can create amazing masterpieces that will blow people's minds, and even you can even step up your game and even pick up other courses or videos on like how to draw, and then you can combine those skills, like your design skills and your developer skills, to actually create amazing experiences like this one. It gives you like an interactive way to engage with these animations right on the community file. So you can like have like your own little portfolio. You can show your animations. This is for one application that I build. So these are the community files. You can even take a look at other people's creations in here. For example, this is the one that we're going to be touching in this series of videos. We're going to be creating this character. So I hope that you follow along and you, again, open your mind, be open to these type of creations, and you will see that just creating basic shapes, you would be able to create something like this. We're going to show you some techniques on how to accomplish stuff like that. You're going to learn about like masking. You're going to be learning about, again, gradients, creating shapes, creating all those animations, artboards, nested artboards. It's going to be amazing. So again, I hope that you guys stay there and continue on with the series of videos, because you're going to learn a lot of really cool things. So the first thing that I would recommend, again, is going over the Rive Editor. That is exactly what we're going to be doing now. If you, for example, create a Rive account, you will need to have like a Gmail account to create it. So I'm going to use a brand new account. I'm calling it Rive Flutter tutorial at gmail.com. So I just created it just for this tutorial. So you have to sign in with your account, and then it pops up on you. It tells you whether you want to use either Google or Facebook. In my case, I'm going to do sign up with Google. So just by clicking on that, I'm going to say, okay, so it asks you what best describe your role. I'm going to say a developer, and then you can create a workspace. I'm going to call it just Rive tutorial. I'm not going to invite any members right now. I'm just going to click on create. And then if you see here, this is the default landing page for the Rive Editor on the web. It looks pretty cool. It tells you exactly where to go. It gives you like a little bit of it tells you where the project files are, personal files are, how to create new files and whatnot. So this is the editor, and here you can even immediately jump into tutorials, which I completely recommend. If you go to the YouTube channel for Rive, they have amazing get started videos. You should get on those if you want a complimentary set of videos aside from this tutorial, so that you can learn more in depth about Rive in general. If you want to learn more, again, the intricacies of Rive in general, you should use some of those get started videos aside from this one, of course. So if you see here, there's the getting started. You can even go through some of those. That's great. I would also invite you, of course, to go to the documentation. They have a great documentation in there. If you click on learn Rive, and then you can even search for stuff. They show you like all the things, all the runtimes available. For example, here you have the Flutter one, and you have even some of that documentation, how to install it, which we will touch in a future video. So stay tuned for that. But back into the editor, let's just jump right into the editor and then let's start playing with it. So the way that you start engaging with the editor and start creating stuff, you go to the top right corner where it says new file right here, and then you just click new file. As soon as it opens up, it launches into this environment where it gives you your workspace, your file, right? So you have one file. In the Rive file, you need to have at a minimum one artboard. We will be discussing what artboards are as we move along. In this particular case, it's asking me to create one artboard. So a file can have an infinite number of artboards, but you need to have at a minimum one artboard available on your file. So artboards are where all the assets that make up your animation come to life. This is where all they reside, right? And they are the foundation of your composition across both design and animate mode. We'll get to that as well. For example, like here, I'm going to create an artboard 500 by 500 just so that we can get going. This is the environment. You can use some of those familiar keyboard and mouse commands. For example, you can use it to scroll up and down. You can use, for example, the command, let's say Command plus if you want to zoom in or out. You could do some of those commands. If you see here at the top right corner, you have design and animate mode. This is the two modes between which we're going to be switching as we create our animations. Design mode is where you do the designs. Animate mode is what once you've created your design and you're satisfied with that, you can toggle that and then you can start creating animations, start bringing it to life little by little. But let's not rush. We're gonna get to that in just a minute, but just know that there's a design mode and an animate mode. For now, we're gonna stick with the design mode for a little bit. So again, think of artboards as the root of every hierarchy. You can create an infinite amount of artboards on the stage. And remember, this is what we call the stage. Like this file, this space over here is called like the stage. And on the stage, you can have multiple artboards. But at a minimum, each Rive file has at least one artboard. So that's what you need to know about. On the left-hand side of the editor, you have the hierarchy. The hierarchy is where you see all the elements either be nested or at the same level, but are the assets and those elements that come together to create an animation. We will see how to create those elements and how to define the hierarchy. The hierarchy, you can have nested elements, you can have them on top of each other, you can have them overlapping, all of that within the hierarchy. Next to it is the assets, and then you have 4 types of assets that you can import into your stage. You have images, you can bring like PNGs, JPEGs, and whatnot. I would recommend always using, or at the most, try to use SVGs and those vector graphics because they give you so much better quality to your Flutter animations. Also, you can use either Lottie files. We won't be talking about Lottie, but Lottie is kind of like an alternative to Rive when it comes to animating SVGs. Fonts, you can bring your own fonts. So you want to provide a high level of customization to your designs. You want to bring those fonts. You don't want to use the fonts that are available already by default by the editor. So you want to use your own custom fonts. You can import them and use them accordingly. And last but not least, you can import audio. We're not going to touch audio in this tutorial, but I would guide you to some of the tutorials available on Rive. So go to their YouTube channel and you can take a look at some of the audio tutorials available there. So a good rule of thumb is always naming your artboards. In this particular case, I created a 500 by 500 artboard. So in this case, you could call it anything you want, but you want to call it something specific. That way you can identify it when you have multiple items within your stage. For example, I'm going to call my artboard Rive Flutter. You could call it anything, but in this particular case, I'm just going to call it Rive Flutter. And you see in the hierarchy how the artboard immediately adopted that name. So this is how you start creating things. So the root of everything, the root of your canvas, like your environment where you're going to be importing all your assets and bringing them to life, is the artboard. So you want to have that as the root element. So anything else comes inside of that artboard. So we're going to continue doing so. So let me go over some of the elements at the top right here. For example, like here, these are for example, how you can change the file name. You can double click on the file name here. I can call it Rive Flutter, but I can also rename it right here. I'll say Rive another Flutter, something like that. And you see how it reflects here on the file, but not on the artboard, because the file is one thing. Artboards are, again, the surfaces where you're going to be engaging in animation. So you can have multiple under a given file. Also, you can check how you can export for runtime or export you can do for backup. We're not going to touch on that right now. So at a minimum, you should know that here you can see how you can rename your file. You can see the revision history. You have to upgrade, of course, for those things. You can generate a share link if you want to share your artboard with other folks, like I showed you earlier, or you can even publish it to the community, like I mentioned. So we're not going to touch on those. We're only going to be focused on, again, creating that experience within the Rive editor. Next in line are the transform tools. You have select. Select is the one, kind of like the mouse cursor, like you want to select stuff. You want to be there whenever you want to select items. Translate whenever you're moving, rotate for rotation, scale for scaling, freeze. We're going to get to freeze, and it's a very important tool, a very important transport tool. We're going to get to that in a minute when it's more pertinent. At least you know that these are the transform tools available there. Here you can create artboards and nested artboards. Remember, you just have one artboard right here, but you can create another artboard easily by just clicking in here, selecting artboard, and you can create another artboard. My recommendation to you is whenever you create one artboard, you can hold, for example, if you select the artboard and you start dragging like that, you can create it in an arbitrary dimension. But if you hold shift, you can actually create it proportional. So it's the same width and height, and you actually get a perfect square. That is my way of doing if I really want to start with a perfect square in order to bring my assets or create some of the animated assets in there. So hold shift while you're doing the artboard, and that actually creates it square. So I do hold and then I start dragging. You see I can drag and it will still be perfectly squared. You can move it around, you can drag it around. Remember, you can even zoom out or zoom in. My Rive Flutter artboard, I'm going to move it to the side. I can move another artboard here. I can name it another, or let's say artboard 2. I can create another one right down here. I'll use shift if I want to make it square, and I can call it artboard 3. And then those artboards, I can just even drag it around. See, this is like a bad practice. You shouldn't have them overlapping. You will learn about nested artboards later, but at least at a minimum, make sure that the main artboards are all on their own space within the stage. And then that gives you better organization. You can see them all in one single layout. You can drag it around. You can arrange them accordingly, but I like to have it like that. So that is the artboard feature right here under the arrangement tools. We're not going to deal with layout or rows or columns, because unfortunately, by the time of this recording, layouts, rows, and columns are not supported in the Flutter runtime, but they will be soon. And of course, the Rive team is actually working on an amazing update to the Rive engine, which is going to bring performance through the roof. Is going to allow us to create amazing creations. Of course, it's going to support things like layouts, rows, columns, slices, and other amazing features that are available right now on Rive, but we're going to have them available soon for Flutter. But for now, the stuff that is over there right now available is huge and is enough for creating amazing creations. Here is what we're going to be mostly interacting with, creating shapes. From the top here, you can see some of these tools. And again, these are called the create tools, because with this is where we're going to be creating our own assets. We're going to manipulate some assets as well. Here you have the pen tool. Everybody should be familiar with a pen tool. You have it on other design tools. You can create things by just selecting points and even drawing your own shapes. You have rectangles, ellipses, triangles, polygons, stars. You have a plethora of creating tools at your disposal. And based on these basic shapes, you can create really complex stuff. These are bones. We're not going to be dealing with bones in this tutorial, but I would encourage you to go to the Rive tutorials on YouTube, and they have a lot of great tutorials on how to create bones, how to use bones for your own characters. And you can also use bones not just for characters, but you could use it to animate other elements as well. I encourage you to go to the Rive YouTube channel, go to their documentation. You can take a look at how to use bones. We will touch in this video series, we're going to touch about text, how to support text. We will be creating some text items, but we will also show you how to manipulate text from Flutter, text that is actually either animated or very custom text in intricate ways, but you're going to be able to edit those from Flutter programmatically. So stay tuned for that video where we're going to be dealing on changing text from Flutter. Here we have, in this one, we have events and joysticks. We're not going to be dealing with those in this tutorial, so let's just skip right ahead. But of course, I would encourage you to take a look at some of those videos on the Rive tutorials on YouTube. They have amazing tutorials related to those topics. And here is how you see your active state. For example, like you see your active artboard. The active artboard is denoted by that dot right there at the corner. This is the one that is actually the active artboard, and here you can just select. You see how as soon as I select one artboard, there's a little circle next to it. Here is just so that you can locate the state machines. We're gonna be dealing with state machines later on in the video, which are a crucial part of creating animations in Rive, and then you can manipulate those in Flutter. And just briefly, again, state machines are just a visual way to connect animations together and define the logic that drives those transitions. So you're gonna be learning a lot about those in upcoming videos, so stay tuned for that. Now I'm just gonna stick with only one of these artboards. See, I can just select the artboard and delete it. And then in this Rive Flutter, we're gonna be dealing with creating your own assets a little bit, just getting familiar with some of those creation tools. We're not gonna create something really complex. I just want to make you familiar with the creation process. For example, let's go to the creation tools right here, and you have, for example, pen. Pen is just like a pen does in any other design tools. You can just click, you can drag and create like your own shapes. You can make very intricate designs, like, you know, if you want to create something like this. I don't even know what I'm creating. I'm just showing you, for example, how to use the design tool, the pen tool, as one of the creation tools available. And then you can use this item, whatever you create, from the pen tool, and you can animate it. Right here on the left hand side, if you see, for example, when you're in design mode, and now when you go to the hierarchy, you see how that shape actually got created inside of the artboard as custom shape, because you haven't defined it, you haven't named it, it is a custom shape. And then I can just rename it, and I'm gonna call it weird shape, something like that. If you select either from the, for example, here from the hierarchy, or you select it right from the artboard, you see on the right-hand side a panel that lights up with all the properties that you can change on your shape. In this particular case, you can change the position. You know, you can, for example, change the X and Y axis. If you can just change it like this, you can change the Y. You can scale it, you know, on the X axis or on the Y axis. You can rotate it. You could do all of those things. Very common in design tools like Figma, Canva, Adobe, Photoshop, or any of those. They're very similar type of creation tools and manipulation options that you have so that you can create your creations, right? Here also you can change like a blending mode, whether normal, dark, and multiply. Very familiar with like Figma, Adobe Photoshop. They have kind of like these same type of features that you can change your shapes, and you can edit your creations as you make progress. You can also change the color. You can change it, for example, from solid, linear, or radial. You can do a lot of things in here. You can change the opacity. For example, I want to make it 50% opaque. For example, I can just do this and change it, like make it very opaque. I can change it back from radial to solid, and I can make it black. I can make it red, white. And then if you see, I can continue decreasing the opacity. You can, and then here you see, for example, how you can clip things. We're going to get to that in a minute. You also have constraints. We're not going to touch that in just right now. And draw order. Those are some of the options that you have on in terms of how you're going to draw things on your artboard. And draw order is actually how you can change the draw order on the elements inside of your artboard. We're not going to touch too much on those. We're only going to stick with the elements up here because we're just covering the basics. But you see, I can rotate it. I can even drag it around with the mouse and do a lot of cool things. So that was the pen tool. The pen tool allows you to freely create shapes as your heart's content, right? You could do a lot of things with the pen tool. Let me delete that, and let's proceed to the next creation tool, which is a rectangle. Rectangle, just like a rectangle is, I can just drag around and create a rectangle. I can rotate it, I can move it around, I can scale it. Remember, just like in the artboards, if you press Shift while you're manipulating the element, you actually scale it proportionally, as opposed to if you just grab one corner. You see how I can change it freely, and the width and the height are arbitrary, as opposed to being consistent and proportionally changing the dimensions of this box. So you can just use the Shift, you hold down the Shift key, and then you can drag it. For example, I can make it like this, but then if I hold Shift, those dimensions get locked, and then I just change it proportionally. So keep in mind, whenever you want to create some items, you want to create like some elements, and then you want to make sure that you actually know how you want to create those elements, whether you want them proportional, whether you want them maintaining one given dimension. So be sure to keep those things in mind. So let me get rid of that. The next thing here is like a triangle. You can create a triangle just like any other triangle. Let me do it again. I'll hold Shift. I'll have the triangle selected, and with the triangle highlighted, I'll just press Shift, and you see how I can drag, and then I have a triangle. So very simple. I can just do the same thing as I did before with the other shapes. I can change the color. I can change the position. I can scale it. But remember, I like to do the scaling proportional. So I hold Shift and I grab one of the corners, and then I can just do that, drag it around and whatnot. Let me add like an ellipse. So I'll go with an ellipse, If you do an ellipse, again, same thing. If I hold shift, I can create a perfect circle. If not, it will be more kind of like a, see, like if you do this, it will be more of like an oval. Like if you just start resizing from one corner arbitrarily, you just turn it into an oval. But if you want to make it into a perfect circle, make sure that whenever you select the ellipse and then you hold shift, you get a perfect circle. Otherwise, then you're going to have to come over here and change the width. For example, you can say, okay, it's going to be a 200 by 200. And the origin could be anywhere. See, I like to use, you can change the origin right here. You see, it's 50% by 50%. It takes you right there, right? Like the origin of within the circle. That's something that we're going to be discussing later. But for example, you can see the position. You can change that position as well. I like to use the mouse and let Rive guide me through positioning my elements. That way it is more accurate and more precise. So you can overlap items, you can bring more items. Another trick that you can use, like if you wanna, let's say you wanna have another triangle without having to go to the creator tools. Without going to the create tools, let's say you wanna create another one. You just hold Alt and you just drag it, and then you see, you just create it. Just like in Figma or any other design tools, you select one element, you press the Alt key, and you can just drag and you have another copy. Press Alt, drag, and you have another copy. You see, just like that. And even this one, because I rotated it, this copy is also rotated. So make sure to keep those shortcuts if you want to use them for your own creation and be productive. You want to learn some of those commands. For example, Shift, if you want to keep something very proportionate. Alt, if you want to copy, like if you hold Alt while you're selecting the element, it just duplicates it. Those are, if you press, for example, delete, you see it deletes the element. Same thing if you do delete, 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 and then you clear your artboard. You want to continue adding things, you can do all of that. So I love the fact that, you can create all of those things in Rive with very minimal effort. I can create again another ellipse here. I can remember, you can change a color, and then I can duplicate it right there, but then I can have one right on top of it, and then I change a color, and then you see how you can start creating stuff right away. I can, for example, have another one. I do Alt, and then I do Alt. You can change the color. You could do really cool things. You can start seeing, for example, your creations come to life as you make progress to it. You bring some of those basic shapes, which defines your creations. And that's exactly how you want to get comfortable with. Other things that you want to change in the editor as part of the personalization in your own, let's say, workflow, you could change the design background. For example, if you want to change it to be like red, oh, that's what you want your stage to look like. You want it to be red. You can change it red just by being on the design mode and change design background color. I kind of like to keep it dark. That's my preference. Also, you could do animate background. Animate background is when you're in animate mode and then you want to change how it looks when you're doing animation. Let's say you want your background to have one particular color, you can do so. You could do that, but I like to keep it also dark. Also around that same topic, in your artboard, you see that the artboard, when you select the artboard, also the artboard lights up some of those properties that you can change in the design mode. You can change the position of the artboard, you can change the size, you can change the origin, but also you can change the fill and the stroke. In this case, you can change the fill of the artboard. If you want like a white artboard, you want it to look more like a canvas where you can paint your creations, you can change it by just selecting the artboard, going to the right hand side, and this area here that says fills and strokes, you can change the color of your artboard. You can remove it, you can hide it, you can just, again, bring it back to visibility, or you can just remove it altogether. My suggestion to you, because we're going to be creating these elements that we may bring into Flutter and overlay it with other elements, overlap them, stack them all together or whatnot, you want to remove the background. Unless it is strictly necessary, then you can add a color to your artboard. Otherwise, I would say no background at all. You can use it temporarily as you're designing because you want to have a background. You can just click here on the plus sign. Again, select the artboard, go to fills and strokes. You click on the plus sign and you click on fill. I'll click it. Clicking on fill gives you this entry where you can change the color. In this case, I can make it again like light gray or white or whatever your favorite color is for a canvas. You can also select the artboard again. You can add a stroke. A stroke adds like a line around it. You see, like it's just like a border. So the stroke is like a border around your element, whether it's the artboard. Even you can do strokes on some of these, let's say some of these tools. You can, for example, select one of those, and you see how here you have the fills and strokes the same way that we did before. You can just change, let's say, one given color, but you also want to add a stroke. You can click here and add stroke. Just by adding stroke, I can just change the thickness of that stroke, change the color of that stroke. In this case is blue, and then I'm just increasing. I can increase the thickness of that stroke. You could also manipulate the properties of that stroke. Here you have like stroke, like solid, trim, dash. You can have like a dash stroke. You could do stroke inside. You could do it in the center. You could do it like a little bit of like corner and all of that. You have like all of these options for adding strokes. You can add, for example, double fills, double strokes. You could do all those things, and you can overlap those and kind of like have composite colors for your assets and for your elements. You can just remove them all if you don't want them, but this is where you say, this is where you create those fills and those strokes. Just click on the plus. You either do fill if you want to fill stuff, stroke if you want to do lines. For example, you could not have a fill or add a stroke line around it. I can just do this and increase the stroke, and you see how the border now shows, but there's no fill. Now, if I want to add a fill, you can just click on the plus, click on fill, change it from linear, radial, solid. Let's do a solid and change it to green. You see how you can use the color picker right here. So it is very intuitive. If you come from tools like Figma, Canva, Photoshop, any of those, Adobe XD, this would be a very familiar workflow. So I would encourage you to practice a little bit with this, get familiar with creating shapes, because we're gonna be diving a lot on those shapes, creating multiple shapes, building our creations from scratch, using basic shapes. You will be amazed of all the things that you can create with just basic shapes, basic circles, basic squares, using colors, solid colors, gradient colors. You're gonna be amazed. And you're like, what, did I create that? Yes, with just basic shapes. Pretty much everything in the world is based on a composite aggregation of multiple shapes. And that is exactly what we're gonna be doing here. Let me remove again the border from my artboard. I will remove the fill, and you see this is pretty much how you would have an artboard available. So make sure to practice on creating shapes. Mostly, again, we're gonna be dealing with ellipses, we're gonna be dealing with rectangles, and then so you can just practice on changing the color. This is very easy. So you feel like you're in a familiar environment when you do something like this, when you create some of those basic shapes. Remember that when you select a shape, you go to the right-hand side and you can edit their position. You can edit their scale, like you want to scale it. In this particular case here on the scale that I want to point out, there's this little link icon next to it. If you select this little icon, you can just lock the scale. If you change the scale from 100 to 50 and you tab, for example, you see how the other one also syncs up with the first one. That means they're linked. And this is a great setting that you should have whenever you're creating, again, those intricate shapes and you truly want to keep things in sync and you want to keep things proportionate. If you change it back, for example, to, let's say 100, back to 100, you see how it changes again to 100. If you unlink it and you change this to 50, the 100 stays like that. Unless that is your intention, then you could do so. The same thing for the size. If you want to change the size from, let's say, 50 to 50, like that, like the path, actually, the underlying path of this ellipse shape. Because in Rive, you can have a shape, and then under a shape, you have paths, because we're dealing with vector images, vector graphics that contain points, and the connection of all those points is actually what makes the path. So you could see the underlying path under the ellipse. Let's say if you grab one of those ellipses and you just go to the hierarchy and you expand it, you see how the path is right there. Let me change this, for example, And then if I go to path and I here on the right hand side, you see how the element just changed completely because ellipse has a set of properties and it's kind of like the wrapper around the path. This is how you define the colors, how you define the strokes, how you define the position, the scale, the rotation and whatnot. But the path, now you go more deeper into the actual shape and you can manipulate it its individual points, like its core composition. You can edit it with the path. Like if you just now select the path and you go to the right hand side in the design panel, you see that you have edit vertices. If I click on edit vertices, here now you're going to convert it to a custom path. If you do this, convert to custom path, see now how you can change each item individually, like each one of the elements of the shape, you can just like change it individually, manipulate it, distort it and whatnot, and you can create really crazy stuff. So I would encourage you to do something like this, try to play with it like I mentioned. But you see the ellipse up here, the shape, the outer shape, still available for you to change its colors even when you manipulated the shape internally. So you changed it from what it was originally to something more custom, but still those properties in the outer shape are non-destructive. So that's what I like about Rive and the editor. We're going to get more into, again, later on, we're going to be creating animations, but you need to be familiar with some of these tooling. You see how my hierarchy is starting to take shape. You see like a bunch of rectangles. You can select them. Remember that I told you about the hierarchy, how if you move one element on top of another, for example, you see this triangle, you see how the triangle, now if I want to move it above everybody, I can even drag it here in the hierarchy, just drag it manually and put it at the top, and now you see it on top of everybody. What if I want to add, let's say, this triangle under that rectangle? Let's say I want to make it a child of the rectangle. You can just drag it inside of the rectangle. Now, actually, that was the ellipse. Let me do it again. So if I just drag it, let's say now I want to drag this triangle inside of the rectangle. There it is. Now inside of my rectangle, now they're together. They're kind of together. You see the triangle is right here. The rectangle is right here. This is when I meant the hierarchy. Now the triangle is a child of the rectangle. And then now whenever I move the rectangle, the triangle moves along with it because it is part of the hierarchy. It's a child of that rectangle hierarchy. But if I move if I move the triangle on its own, it just moves within the coordinates, within the bounds of the rectangle hierarchy, so to speak. And if you see here, even the position changes. If I drag the triangle out there, look at the position. But if I drag it inside of the rectangle, you see how the position changed in regards to the dimensions of the rectangle and the scope or the dimensions and the area of where the rectangle is, like the hierarchy of that rectangle. So that's something to keep in mind. And you see how also the rectangle is underneath it because it's underneath the core path of that shape. I can just drag the triangle above, right here above the path, but still inside of the rectangle, and you still see how the triangle does not overtake the main path of the shape because it is a child of it. So you need to make sure, like I mentioned one more time, become familiar with these shapes, using the pen tool, using the rectangle, ellipse, triangle, all of those available in there, because we're going to be using those a lot for when we create our custom shapes to build our animations and build our characters and build our buttons and all of that. So make sure to get familiar with all of those. So as a recap on the Rive Editor, remember you can have the Rive Editor as this web-based animation tool for you to compose your animations, create your assets and whatnot. You can also download it as a desktop application, either for Mac or Windows. One file has the stage. The stage contains all the artboards. If you see, you can create multiple artboards. This is my main artboard, but you can create other artboards next to it. You can have a minimum of one artboard per file, but you can have an infinite number of artboards within your stage, within that file. You can just name your artboards as you see fit. I would say create a unique name per artboard. This is going to be key for when later you want to programmatically access them and whatnot, but you name your artboards as you see fit. Flutter tutorial, you call it whatever you want. On the left hand side of the editor, you have the hierarchy where you see as the root element is the actual artboard. Inside of the artboard, then you can add multiple things. In our case, we can add other shapes, you can add rectangles, and you see as soon as you create it, it starts building your hierarchy. You can add ellipses, triangles, and whatnot. You can change a lot of things, and you see how my artboard is independent from this one. This one contains some of those elements, but when I select this one, you see how it has this. You are going to work on the design mode first, but whenever we're going to tackle the aspect of animations, we're going to flip to animate, and that's where we're going to cover some of those elements. But for now, focus on the design piece of it, because this is where you're going to be importing your assets, creating your own assets. When you select one element from the hierarchy, you can change colors, you can change position, you can scale it, you can rotate it, you can change the underlying path as well. The underlying path, you have shapes, and then shapes have like core vector paths underneath it that then you can manipulate the individual points and make more intricate shapes and creations. You can change the blend mode or change the opacity. Let's say if I want to make it 50% opaque, you can change the fills and strokes. Here you have a fill, but you can remove the fill and you can add a stroke line around it. And in this case, it's going to be a white stroke around a circle, but it's still 50% opaque. So I'm going to bring it back to 100. You can change the color from solid, linear, or radial. You could do that. It's very familiar, just like any other design tools out there. Also, you can select it, you can drag it around, you can overlap it. Later, we're going to discuss what are some of these other items, but familiarize yourself with the basics of creating shapes, creating artboards, just simple artboards. Bring those elements, overlap them. Doing this, like if you want to bring one inside of the other and whatnot, you can do some of those things. One thing that I wanted to show you as part of this, again, initial tutorial is you can group things. Remember the same way that you can group things by dragging one inside of another? Another way to group them is you can select them using shift. Let's say you're going to select those two. You don't want one to be the parent of the other. You want them to be siblings to a group, a concept of bringing items together at the same level that you can move them as a unit, then you can group. The way that you do it is you select the items that you're interested in grouping using shift. You could do that, or you can even do, for example, you can select command and you can select them arbitrarily. If they're consecutive, you can also do the same thing. Select one, do command, and then you can select them. And then after that, you do Command G. Let's say if you're in a Mac, you do Command G, and you see how they're grouped. It's just like a transparent basket that just brings them all together. Imagine like a transparent container that just brings them all together, and then they are part of the same unit that you can just move as a unit. You can just drag them all around. Here, as opposed to the previous way to group things like dragging something inside of another, you can change the hierarchy, and you see how the hierarchy actually gets affected. You see how the rectangle is actually at the top of this hierarchy in regards to the top group. Here, for example, I can call this group shapes, and then now I have my shapes group moving as a unit where all those three are moved as a unit. I can, like I told you, I can rearrange these items, move them inside of this group, and their position doesn't get affected when I move the parent group. This is a great strategy that we will be using it much further in the tutorials for how to group things together, how to move them together, consider them a unit, and change them in one swoop, scale them all at the same time, rotate them all at the same time. Just look at this. I can rotate them all at the same time. I can scale them all at the same time. I can change their positioning inside, and that way I can alter some of those things, their properties as a unit. And you see inside of the group, I can also change that unit. I can try to change even within the shape, within that group called shapes, I can change their properties, and they're still affected individually. Some of the properties that you can change at the same time is, again, like whenever you want to scale them, you see, remember holding shift, you can change them all at the same time, and then you can take them out of that shape group and they maintain some of the properties that were affected while they were children of that parent. It's just amazing, but it's also very familiar on how you can do these same type of maneuvers in other design tools. I love Rive because it makes me feel comfortable when I just came in from other design tools. It made me feel at ease, it made me feel at home, and I can immediately start hitting the ground running when it comes to creating my own animated elements. And you see, same thing with the others. Let's say if I want to continue bulking up on this group, I can drag other things inside, and you see how now my group became a little bit bigger with this additional one. I can add another one, and you see how now my group gets a little bigger, and so on and so forth. So I hope that, again, you can continue practicing on some of those strategies, grouping strategies, manipulating the elements using the right hand panel in the design panel right there. You can just change the position, scale, rotation. You can change the color to solid, grading, linear, radial, whatever. You can group things, you can ungroup things, delete them, move them around, change the layers, change kind of like how they're stacked up on top of each other, change their position in the hierarchy. So those are the things that are going to build those foundations so that you can build more intricate elements, more intricate assets that are going to delight your user. So why don't you stay tuned. We're going to continue with the next video. And in the next video is then where we're going to be creating something for the first time. We're going to be animating it. We're going to be bringing it into Flutter just as a first pass so that you can get more confident in how you're building and how you're making progress through this video series. Okay, so just stay tuned and see you on the next video. Hey everyone, I'm Roman. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on other Flutter content coming my way. Thank you so much for your support. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media.